You're on.
Thanks, Tim. Hi, everybody. It's really good to have you back. This is our 9th anniversary show. Since Adam first sent out a message on cloudy nights that says, hey, anybody kind of want to do an astro imaging channel? And a few of us said, yeah, we'll pitch in and help you out with that and see how it goes. And that's 456 or 65 or something like that videos ago that happened. And we're going to go through a little bit about what the last year was like and a little bit of the other things. And we're going to tell you about some of the things we're doing in the future. We're going to tell you about our shorts. We got a special program of shorts that we've been working on, and Molly and Patrick and some other people have been working on that. Gowri is going to be telling us about imaging on the Mac, and then we're going to have a short for 20 minutes or so about getting your off-axis guider configured properly. So I'm going to start sharing my screen right briefly here because we are going to tell you about, let's see, that calendar. And as you can see, that's what I just described. Bob Denny's going to be here next week. He's been working on Alpaca for you all, guys, so that you can all connect your devices properly and communicate with them as needed. Adam Block says, hey, I found out some stuff about stretching, and you guys are the best people to tell people about it. So he's going to be coming on June 18th to tell us about stretching. And then Grexpert, the Grexpert expert, is coming on to tell us more about Grexpert. We had a little show about it the other day. We're going to have more. And we've got other people coming up. We do have some openings. So as always, hit the links and take it from there. Now, we're going to be doing this a little different tonight. I am not going to be doing a live presentation for you, but Tim is in charge. Tim, are you ready to play that console of yours?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Tim, take over and show us what the year in review is about. The Astro Imaging Channel is not just a means of presenting some of the newest ideas and information about astro imaging. Here you can watch the presentations on a regular, pre-announced basis, and you can ask your own questions and get them answered interactively. But it is more. It's a family. It's a club. You meet in your living room, and every Sunday night or maybe Monday morning, it takes people to run it. It takes an organization to pull it off. And those interrelationships must be recognized now and then. We all have different dynamics in our families. Every once in a while, it is good for the family to sit down and figure out what's been happening and what needs to happen. This little anniversary meeting for the Astro Imaging Channel helps do that every year. Kind of time to review and talk about the future. Here we see the viewership of the channel over our lifetime and over the past year. We're up to 1,550,000 views in the 9 years that we've been at this. And this year's increase, or 278,000, is an increase of about 32% over last year's. Over our lifetime, we've had 378 years worth of eyeballs on the screen. Of course, we should probably divide by 2 since most of our viewers have 2 eyes. It's a smaller but still impressive 39 years of people watching these shows. This year we had 62,000 hours of watch time, a bump of 16% over last year. We also had another good year for subscribers, with about 2,300 joining us and pushing us over the 15,000. By the way, you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now if you haven't yet done it. But you know, it's not a competition, and our job is not to beat the other channels, but to deliver the best astro imaging information we can with live interaction where our viewers can ask their questions directly and get a personalized answer. So while #1 of all YouTube channels is a great accomplishment, and it's fun to say we're #1, alas, we're really number 789,715 on the list of YouTube channels. And while that is a number that is not all that impressive in itself, it has allowed us to rise above the crowd of 15 million channels out there to the 95th percentile overall in the social blade rank of all YouTube channels. I have no idea what a social blade rank is, but that percentile ranking is consistent with what YouTube says itself on how many subscribers and how much traffic we have compared to other YouTube channels. We increased our female viewership by 500% to 2.3% over last year's 0.4%. We still have work to do. 3 years ago, we had only 4 women presenters. 2 years ago, we doubled that to 8. Last year, we flopped. Outside of Molly's trip to Okie, Texas, we had no women presenters. We need more of you to volunteer. We know you're out there. Come represent your growing influence. Talk to other women you know in astroimaging and bring them into our family. Also, although defining a minority in a worldwide audience is weird, my going through the database of programs did not reveal any minority presenters. We are a touch younger than we have been in the past in our audience. And as far as geography goes, we have 48 countries represented altogether, but 24% of those were 24% of our audience were from a foreign country. 3 shows were noteworthy for bringing in a lot of eyeballs this year. One was at the tail end of last year, and it came in second place. David Payne and Mike Cranfield describing their hyperbolic stretch. Now that show was the second most watched show of the year. Molly and Patrick abstracted that into a 20-minute version here, which was the third most watched show of the year. Didn't have as big an impact on its preview, but as you can see, it stretched on and on and on, with that little orange line going all the rest of the year. Richard Wright's show about why guiding needed to die was the next most watched, and Trevor Jones' autobiography, The Evolution of a Backyard Astronomer, brought not only lots of eyeballs to the show, but we picked up a significant number of subscribers that night. The back-focused short did not get so many views in its original run right here, but because it just hung in there all year, became the most watched show throughout the year, earning the top spot. Also in the top 10 for the year was Guilan Roshan's demonstration of backyard EOS, which has been hanging around since the 4th month of the Astroimaging channel nearly 9 years ago, and hanging around with vigor. It and a few others of those early shows are annually in our top 10 shows, and in particular, Guilan's show is still the #1 in all of the Astroimaging channel shows. This milestone report is about the same as the report from last year. The good news is that we seem to be even further ahead on scheduling speakers for you. And the only time we had an open session is when a presenter broke his internet connection and did not realize it. We picked up for him that night. We're keeping that promise not to have open sessions. As you can see, though, we have blank dates coming up. And as you know, finding a volunteer to present to you each week is the hardest part of this job. We're so happy that a number of you are using the contact form to contact us and give us your name and sign up to be a presenter. The biggest new milestone is the introduction of the TAIC shorts. These are generally short videos to highlight certain processes and techniques. I'm going to let Molly and Patrick, who do most of the work on these, explain it all to you when I'm finished here. So we'll skip this for now. Good news and bad news on viewer contributions. There were largely 2 efforts. The workshop program is running strong with another edition coming up in August. Go to the website, click on TAIC Workshop, and you'll find a set of data for you to process. Rory may ask you to present for a few minutes and tell us what you did to get your beautiful picture. TAIC Shots, on the other hand, where we gave our viewers a chance to send in their pictures on a certain subject, Arno did the work to put that together with music and into pretty little videos. However, we were not getting the response we hoped for. And we have to just put that effort on a back burner. You can still see the videos from the past on the website, though. Gowri has taken leadership on getting all 465 of our videos annotated for easy reference. It's nearly impossible to catch up to completely, though. She and Wanda are working on it. If you've not tried the database, go to the program website, program database, and click on that link there and this link down here, and you will get a view like this. You can use it to find certain programs and do some research on what we've had on the shows before. We do have some expenses and we have to think about how to finance what we do. We don't like ads in our shows, but we do have expenses in production software, internet fees, Google subscriptions. Our income has come from outright grants. That is, viewers simply send us a check or a PayPal donation, no questions asked. We've had several donations of more than a few $100s. They are appreciated. We also occasionally get a contribution from viewers who take advantage of the dollar sign at the bottom of the comment section on YouTube and send us a few bucks. Swag? Well, as I stare into my camera and see you all out there, your pretty little faces nestled in an adorable hoodie with a TAIC logo aglow in the reflection of the monitor screen. You're all so cute dressed in your TAIC swag, in my imagination. Well, the swag is not really contributing too much to our expenses. We sold 2 sweatshirts all year. I'm not sure, but I think both to me. You can start a new trend by hitting the bottom of the YouTube screen, and next Sunday night, you'll be all there, sitting out there in the glow of your monitor with your hoodie with the TAIC logo on it. One of the main reasons for having an anniversary show is to recognize the people who work hard and pull this off every week. As you know, 5 years ago or so, we incorporated as a nonprofit so that the Astro Imaging channel would have a life of its own. Regardless whether one individual or another left the group, we could go on because TAIC itself is an entity unto itself. We've had our annual corporate meeting, and Alex, Eric, and Tolga were left in control of the corporate affairs, as if anybody could really be in control with this particular bunch. For some years, we've been recruiting and empowering individuals to handle the different parts of the operation. Molly, Terry, Patrick, and Tim are in charge of getting the program from Google Meets to the YouTube stream. Gowri manages updating the database. Molly and Patrick do the TAIC shorts. Rory has busied himself with organizing the workshop shows. I do a lot of the upfront organizing, securing speakers, and being the MC. Incidentally, this is the last show with that organization. In the future, we shall be trading some of those duties around and making some changes in how we do things. In addition to the individual responsibilities, we keep in pretty close contact by email, by meeting before and after each Sunday show, and by discussing what we need to do to pull off this weekly basis thing. It is not necessarily an organized discussion and certainly not anything hierarchical or formal. But like I said earlier, the family needs to get together and have everybody pulling some of the weight. I don't remember the original stories on all these people and where they come from and how they came to be part of the crew. But I do know that what makes them different is that they have stepped forward and somehow got invited back to the show each week and eventually took over a specific part of the tasks. If you want to play, hit the contact button on the website right here, fill in the information, and tell us how you want to help. When I ask people if they want to present, sometimes they tell me they don't think they have the chops to present. They have not won any APODs. In short, they go on about everybody who presents here on the Astro Imaging channel is so much better than they are at imaging. Well, that's just not true. While we undoubtedly have some of the best, we also have tons of people who have something to offer, but will never be recognized outside of their buddies. Some of the most popular programs we have are What I Wish I Knew Before I Started shows. Maybe you can't clean out all the noise in your images. Maybe you can't get all the contrast you want, but you know something that somebody else doesn't know. And you can spread that wealth, okay? The second objection is that everything has already been presented. My first answer, of course, is no, it has not. You have something in your brain that you need to share. My second and more important answer is that it's okay to present another show on a similar topic as long as the approach is fresh and from a different perspective. For example, a show on which equipment to buy for astroimaging is a lot different when given by a newbie than one given by a rich, experienced user contemplating a full-blown remote observatory. Furthermore, what makes you think that the first guy did it right? Maybe your perspective is just that much better. So think of something. Go to the website, hit the contact button, and tell us that you want to present. We will respond, asking a few things, and see about getting you a date on the calendar. Remember, every time you walk into a room of people, there will be somebody smarter than you are or somebody who knows something you don't know. You still have something to bring to the conversation. John Madden played lineman in college, never played in the NFL, and later became a decent coach. Really, if I were in the backfield trying to run the ball, I would not choose him to block for me. But I sure would like to have him on the sidelines coaching me and all those that did have to block for me. In the same way, you can offer something to others, even if you yourself cannot pull it off as well as you would like. Remember, whenever you walk into a room of people, somebody in the room is going to be smarter than you, and somebody's going to know something you don't know. Well, you can be the person that offers something to somebody else. Don't let being shy stop you. A couple of comments about the future. We want to grow the audience and improve the broadcast. As for growing the audience, yes, we're proud that we have nearly 15,000 subscribers. Hit the subscribe button and we can pop the 16K. Let's make it clear, though, that our goal is not to have more subscribers. Our goal is to spread the word about astroimaging so well that people want to watch us. The fact that we are growing means we're doing something right. The metric is a way to see if we are meeting our goal of spreading the word. And only in that sense do we want to grow these metrics. Our numbers should be higher because we are spreading the word better. Most imagers now have heard of the channel. We need your help to spread the word out there about this YouTube channel. Tell your buddies. Pass around some links on cloudy nights and the other places you guys hang around. When you see somebody asking a question related to a show you've seen here, tell them they can come here and find out some information about it. This is the slides from last year's anniversary show. We did some of these things, but we did not do others. One thing that has occasionally come up is the screen on the YouTube streaming. The reason we are somewhat stuck in the resolution of 720 is the limitations of all meeting software, not just Google Meets or Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever. And we need that meeting software in order to retain our interactivity and live nature of the presentations. We will continue to work on these limitations. We have learned about zooming on the screen and tried other options, but the nature of the software has its limits. You will notice that both growing the audience and improving the broadcast involves getting advice and assistance from others who have worked YouTube and social media and know its inner algorithms. As smart as Terry, Tim, Patrick, and Molly are at networking and streaming, none of us in this inner circle at TAIC are hardcore YouTubers. But we know there are people who know how to improve both production values and the spread of the program. We know there are people watching these programs who are masters at Weebly and could improve our website. This stuff is all a tad mystifying to me. Analyzing the hits on YouTube metrics, positioning the channel with tags and all that, website search engine optimization. I'm simply not a social media mogul. Mogul, I mean, I'm not even a social media person. I still put my signature on my texts. If I send one, I send a text at all instead of an email. But some of you people out there have the skills we lack. We could use your help and advice to spread the word and make the word better. So once again, I show you the contact button from the website, theastroimagingchannel.org. Go there and pitch in. We'd really appreciate it. With that appeal for more volunteers, we conclude our annual review. I hope you enjoyed peeking into how we operate. On behalf of the whole crew, I invite you to settle in for some information about TAIC shorts, on Gowri's talk about imaging with a Mac, and later a little something from me about off-axis guiders.
Go ahead, Molly.
All right.
Alex, first of all, that was fantastic. That was a great presentation. Thanks for all that summary and all those notes. And yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Welcome, dear. Yeah, well, go for it.
Now you said in the video that I will talk about the shorts, so I'm going to do that. The shorts, not to be confused with the shots, are videos that we have extracted from the long form shows, these hour-long live broadcasts, so that you can have a condensed piece of information on a particular thing be its own separate video. This is great for linking on Facebook or cloudy nights when somebody is confused about something or wants to know about something. You can just say, hey, Mike Cranfield did a whole talk on exactly how to use generalized hyperbolic stretch. And here's just the portion of how to actually do it. And that links to, there's a link in there for the full video so you can hear all about the explanation and the development and stuff. But the shorts, the idea of the shorts is to have like a segment, a slice from the videos, especially on some kind of hard, like here's a section on how to do this one thing or about this one type of device. So we have videos on there like how to use Graxpert, how to use a Botanoff mask, how to process James Webb Space Telescope data in a 10-minute segment. And one of our most popular videos on what is back focus, which is a very commonly asked question, has over 10,000 views. So that's pretty awesome. I'm glad that people are sharing that around and getting that good information out there on what back focus actually is and how to deal with and how to do stuff about it. We have a whole lot of PixInsight and some Photoshop processing videos as well for little segments on like how to improve your images by including hydrogen alpha data. But instead of watching the whole show, you can go find just the one segment if you want to refer back to it. We're slowly, Patrick and I are slowly working on putting these videos together. Mainly, we've been working on the more recent ones. And you know, I'm working on my PhD. He's got a day job, so we're getting these out eventually. But if you have any suggestions on like, hey, there was a segment that was on like 2 years ago about how to do this thing, and I think you make a really great short, hit the contact us button on the website on the astroimagingchannel.org and let us know, and then we'll add that to our to-do list of shorts to go make. And so where you're going to find the shorts is if you go to our YouTube channel, search for the Astro Imaging channel, of course. There's two easy places to find it. One is if you click on videos, which shows our uploaded videos as opposed to our live videos. They're all listed there. Second, you can click the playlists tab, and that's got all of our live videos broken out into different categories like image processing videos, hardware videos, general tips and tricks videos, and there's a playlist for the shorts. So you can go find all the shorts on that playlist as well. So that's how you can find those. And yep, I think that's all the things I wanted to say about shorts.
Hey, thank you, Molly. And by the way, remember when we were talking about volunteering for things? You like watching the programs? If you see somebody doing something within the show that you think should be made into a short, well, silly, make it into a short. Go for it. You can do that. Just go ahead and help edit it and send it up to Molly and the rest of us up here at the Astro Imaging channel, and we'll consider putting it up as part of one of our shorts that we've made from the other programs. If you feel that you would like to make some shorts on your own topics, go for it. Speaking of which, Gowri has been making a short for us, and it's going to be about imaging with a Mac, because several weeks ago, some people wrote in and said that they want to know more about imaging with the Mac. So Gowri Visveswaran went to work. Yeah, I got it, pretty much. And about Gowri, it's your program. Go ahead and take it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alex and Molly. And I will be presenting now and talking about imaging with the Mac. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, and you can hit that hide button on the box at the bottom.
Thank you. Oops. Thank you, everyone. So let me get started.
think we went back to the meet screen instead of the presentation window. Sorry. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, apologies. Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Gowri Vishveshwaran, and I'm going to be talking about deep sky astrophotography on OSX. So just a quick background on myself. I've been deep sky imaging since the summer of 2020, member of NOVAC and software engineer by profession. Mac and Linux are my primary operating systems for practically everything. And I do use Windows to some extent for image acquisition and processing. So I use both the Mac and Windows for image data acquisition, and I'll touch upon that further down in the presentation. So I have two setups at home. My backyard observatory is an L350 with an OS RIDK with a 6200 mono with an off-axis guider, chroma filters, and a moonlight nightcrawler rotator focuser. I do have a portable setup that I take to dark side, so use in my backyard with an Ioptron CM40 and a stowaway and 2600. So this one is completely Mac compatible, and when I first started using it at home and on sites, I used to take my Mac along, and I started using ASI Studio to control it, and the native Ioptron applications for polar alignment, etc. So that's how I essentially started off my imaging journey. And my backyard observatory, unfortunately, demands Windows for some of the more operating system specific portions like the plane wave software, etc. So that's where I stand. So the agenda for today's presentation will be, essentially, I'll break the presentation up into planning, image, acquisition, then the actual acquisition, and then the processing on Mac versus Windows, and touch upon INDI and Alpaca very briefly for this presentation, and how installation differs on Mac versus Windows, and third-party plugins and module support on the Mac, and some of the limitations that I've run into acquiring data on the Mac. And one option, or if you have a Mac and absolutely need Windows for something, is to either virtualize or use Parallels to get Windows to do anything that's Windows specific. So in terms of for image planning alternatives, there are several that I've used, and there's Stellarium, which I use fairly heavily, the SkyX, and all of these work on the Mac. Then there's K-Stars, which I haven't used personally, or Sky Safari. There's also Observatory, Edge and Sky, and Astroplanner. And one thing I should mention is all the images that are in this presentation have actually been processed almost entirely on a Mac, with a few exceptions that I'll touch upon. So the image acquisition alternatives are my first journey with ASI Studio, ASI Air on the Mac, ASI Studio on the Mac particularly, and ZW is pretty well supported for this. PHD2 is another cross-platform application that's used for guiding. And the SkyX I use again for various things. All of these again work on the Mac. Then K-Stars with Ecos, Ioptron, QHI Polemaster for polar alignment, and Indigo AI for both the astro cameras and for DSLRs uses Indy. Sky Safari also uses Indy and Alpaca. Then there's CloudMaker Suite, which is Astro Telescope and other tools. Then the imaging processing is where most of my presentation is going to focus on. And I primarily use PixInsight and Photoshop, both of which work on both Mac and Windows. And it's very transparent. And I'll show further down that the look and feel is pretty identical. So when I go back from Windows to the Mac, I don't even feel there's a significant difference in how the usability of those two. And then there are some other applications that you can use. Cyril is very heavily used. It's written in C, has a command line interface if that's what you're comfortable with. There's Indigo AI, there's Affinity Photo, K-Stars with Ecos, then there's Observatory Astro Pixel Processor, the CloudMaker Suite, then there's Graxpert, which is Alex touched upon, which is used to remove gradients. And GIMP is another tool that's free, which I started off using and quickly graduated onto PixInsight because I found that it had more capabilities for imaging. So there are certain plugins and modules that are not supported on the Mac. And for these, I fall back to my Windows machine. And one of them is this fun plugin called Star Sprites Pro, which is on Photoshop. And this is a highly subjective area. Some people love spikes, some don't. And if you like them, then this is a great tool that you can use on Windows. But it's unfortunately not supported on the Mac. And the other thing I wanted to touch upon is CUDA. CUDA on Windows helps to speed up the AI modules that Russ and other PixInsight providers have. And I found that there's a significant difference on how fast these AI processes work. And if you have larger images, it definitely makes a difference. So some of the limitations I've run into on the Mac is the lack of support for popular tools like SharpCut Pro, Nina, and Voyager, and even plane waves if you're using their mounts or Windows only. And one thing that I would like to point out is, depending on your equipment, it starts to get very subjective on whether you're going to be stuck with using Windows to control your equipment or whether it would work on the Mac. So it's always recommended to evaluate a trial to determine if the app works for your particular setup. So the market share, again, for Mac and Linux-based OSs is lower than Windows. So I think that's tied to support. ASCOM, to point out, is again supported on Windows and not on the Mac, but Alpaca is opening ASCOM to other operating systems. Sky Safari is an example of a tool that's using this. INTI is the framework for cross-platform apps, and I've pointed out the link where you can get more info on that. So thank you, Tim, for this information, but SkyX on the Mac SkyX is cross-platform. It runs on Windows, OS X, and Linux. On Windows, ASCOM driver support is available. On Mac, we need to support these devices, and X2 is the standard for authoring support for these devices. And there's more information on the website. And an example screenshot for driver selection is on the right there. So what is Indy? Indy is an open source software to control astronomy equipment, and it's based on the INDI protocol. So it essentially acts as a bridge between clients and hardware devices and can be used for either backyard or more elaborate setups. It's open source, cross-platform support, there's a website, and apps. There's some fairly common apps like K-Star, PixInsight, PhD2, etc., which are supported using Indy. Alpaca is the newer ASCOM, and again, it works on multiple platforms. And ASCOM was historically a Microsoft COM technology, but Alpaca has no dependency on Windows. And if you are a developer, there are multiple technologies that you can use to author support. And one of the things that I ran into was installation differences on Mac versus Windows, since I've been using both systems for processing. PixInsight definitely has a more manual installation process on the Mac. You have to actually go in and delete an older version and make sure you don't clobber the license, but also make sure that your modules and scripts are present when you upgrade to a new version. PhD2 just has a zip file with the app packaged. Most of the apps on the Mac are packaged as DMGs. Photoshop's pretty well supported. It has a seamless Mac installation. So one thing that I do typically is I acquire my data mostly using Windows, although I do use the Mac on occasion. And I found that Windows is more appropriate for my personal setup. I create the masters, the calibration, registration, integration, mostly on Windows, but I also use the Mac to do this. And sometimes I just have both running in parallel on multiple images. And Windows, I typically use for Blur Exterminator with CUDA and other AI modules. And I finished the images mostly on the Mac using Photoshop and PixInsight. So if you look at the screenshot here, I have both open in parallel with images, and the look and feel is practically identical. The only difference really is the operating system toolbar. And Photoshop is pretty similar. So here are some of the useful links. And the macobservatory.com is basically the reference that I've found for astronomy support for the Mac platform. There's indie cloud makers that I wanted to point out to. And some of the images are on my Astrobin page here. And a lot of the data for the images that I've presented here are from Mike Selby, who provided me the raw data, which I processed. And my contact information here. And that's it for the slideshow. Thank you. Back to you.
Awesome. So what all what all manufacturers do you know of that have indie drivers that can or native drivers that can work on a Mac? Like you mentioned ZWO. Do you happen to know who else has drivers that will work in the SkyX or other software on the Mac for acquisition?
Not offhand in terms of the manufacturers per se.
Yeah.
Was that a question?
I can tell you for indie, there's a pretty long list.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yes.
One of the things that Bob Denny will be telling about next week will be Alpaca. I think there'll be some promise in that too. But Tim and Gowri and I was asked also in helping develop this program what there was to talk about imaging on the Mac. And that was one of the big difficulties about imaging with the Mac, is getting it connected to equipment. So there'll be lots more to be told about that issue. Okay. Are there other questions out there? I'm in the wrong screen right now.
I think we're all set. The one question, I guess, when Bob will have more to say about Alpaca. But
Yeah.
it looks like, from what Gowri said and what we already know, that image processing with PixInsight and Photoshop seems to be pretty much identical on both platforms. So I think that's one takeaway as far as connecting equipment. I think we'll discuss more of that next week with Alpaca.
Okay, then we are ready for the final segment of our show, in which we are going to tell you about off-axis guiding. And to do that, we shall turn it over to Administrator 1, Timothy Hutchinson. Tim, you want to play the video?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Off-axis guiding is not as mysterious as some make it. As with all the shorts on the Astroimaging channel, this tutorial will only cover the highlights, and do it fairly quickly. Feel free to rerun the video and digest it at a more reasonable speed later. But let's get you focused on off-axis guiding. Auto-guiding is the process of taking a picture and choosing a guide star. Take another picture and see if the guide star has moved. If it has not, do nothing. But if it has moved, move the mount such that your star is back where it started, and do it again, and again. There are several ways to do it, with their own considerations. The one we'll be talking about is off-axis guiding. If this is the main axis of the telescope here, we are going to pick off a bit of the light and move it off-axis to our guide camera up here. Some filter wheels come with a pick-off prism in front of the filter wheel. These things focus generally the same as an off-axis guider. Realize that the job of an optic is to take the whole aperture of nearly parallel rays coming from a distant object and bend them so that they come together at the sensor. Notice the triangular shape here. And note that no ray tracing as this can adequately show the near infinity of rays that are actually entering into the scope. These triangles are true no matter what type of scope you have. If you use a focal reducer or flattener, then you still have triangles, although the shape may be altered somewhat as the light passes through the correcting optic. We should have some definitions. Different parts of the target in space send out their rays. They send out different rays. And then the rays are bent in the optics, and then they hit the back of the scope. Since the telescope is round, you wind up with an image circle. And the image circle is sharpest and brightest in the middle, and as it trails off, it gets dimmer and fuzzier. We're going to put a main imaging sensor in the good part of this image circle, and we still have this little yellow part up here that we can use for other purposes. Changing the emphasis of our tracing, note how each part of the celestial field of view out here leaves something in the image circle. The yellow part comes up to the yellow part up here. The yellow rays will be hitting those hitting the guide sensor. But if we put a filter in the path, it will rob stars of some of the light that comes in. And the guider needs the light. So instead, we put a prism mirror right here that redirects the light that would have come in here up instead to a sensor that we put in a different place. And the critical thing for off-axis guiding is that the yellow and the orange parts match. They must be the same distance precisely. Well, except for some fudge factors, since there may be flatteners and correcting optics, filters, and other glass things in between, we might have to fudge a bit. But remember those matching triangle heights. Almost all guide cameras have the basics: a relatively fast USB 2.0 or better for communication and perhaps for power, an ST4 connector for the camera to the mount, although usually your mount will be directly connected to a computer and it doesn't need the ST4 connector. They should be as small and light as possible to avoid excess load on the imaging train. Consider whether you want a puck or an eyepiece shape. Puck or an eyepiece shape. Pucks can be hard to squeeze into the space in the front of a camera body. I find the 1 1/4 barrel eyepiece body easier to mount. The rest of these recommendations over here relate to finding more stars at the longer focal lengths, slower f ratio, dimmer, and reduced field of view you will have in an off-axis guider compared to the traditional guide scope. First, you should get it as sensitive as possible, the highest quantum efficiency, and a mono without a bare matrix in color that you find in color cameras sees more light. You'll benefit from at least a 6 to 8 millimeter sensor, and bigger can be better. I do not worry about pixel size so much. The guiding software can guide at sub-pixel level, and with the extended focal length of an off-axis guider system, the resolution of your pixel size will not be a determining factor. Finally, get one as noise-free and hot pixel-free as possible. Today's lower noise cameras and dark frame removal of hot pixels help a lot, but guide stars are easier to find with a cleaner image. Think about the size of your guider. With a full-frame sensor, you simply need a bigger opening. With an APS or smaller, you may be able to get by with a smaller prism that can reach further in. A thin guider has more spacing options. By thin, I mean this distance here compared to this distance here. But beware, are they really thinner? See how this one already has its threaded connections there? How thick will these bodies be when they get their connectors? Some have easier adjustments, some require hard to find Allen wrenches. Consider all this when you purchase. Mostly, you want them to be light, stable, and compatible with your equipment. You'll also go through a bunch of spacers and adapters. Note one nice thing about these things, these very thin spacers over here. They may also act as washers, allow you to separate adapters that otherwise tend to weld themselves together. You're better off with threaded adapters, but as you go shopping, remember thread diameters and pitches. They must all match. The distance from the end fitting of your guide camera to the sensor should be as short as you can get. You can always add a spacer if you need more distance, but you cannot remove some spacing if the sensor is too deep in the camera. Size your prism and pick-off mirrors so that and your camera together so that you don't have to, but it helps to have a camera that can serve your pixel well. Get as large of both as you can with the following warnings. You must be able to fit the prism between the main image sensor and the edge of the off-axis guider housing. The bigger the prism and guide sensor, the more bucks you got to spend. 6 to 8 millimeter sizes for both will suffice, but if you've got bigger and can get them in there, that would be better. One way to focus a guide camera is to change the distance between the prism and the guide sensor. Prism will be here, guide sensor up here. On most guiders, the guide camera attaches and can be moved along a stalk that holds the prism pickoff mirror at the other end. This is the stalk, and the prism is at this end. The guide camera will be up on this end. You first mix the depth of the prism next to the main camera sensor and then slide the guide camera on the stalk and focus it. That is, move its sensor as far from the prism as the prism is to the main camera sensor. In a camera with a helical focuser, like this one, often the focuser itself is attached to the stalk. In these types, once the camera to prism distance is fixed, the focus does not change when you move the stalk up and down. You change what the prism and sensor sees, but the guider remains in focus. In other off-axis guiders, the prism holder and the camera are independent. You still adjust the prism, and then you adjust the guide sensor, but changing the relative position of the two changes the focus. It's important to know which kind you have and how to adjust together the two of them or independently as appropriate. Some off-axis guiders allow you to move the prism and the yellow sensor from side to side. Here's our yellow sensor. We could move it over here or over to here, as you see here. This makes it capable of finding a much larger area of guide stars. Some users rejoice in their helical focuser. A little twist allows focusing the guide sensor. But seriously, once you have an off-axis guider focused, you usually just leave it there forever. Unless you have another camera or filters with a dramatically different thickness, you don't need the helical focuser again. They cut into the guider back focus, which may or may not be a problem, and they cost some bucks. Although many of us like to set up so that the guide corrections move along the RA and X axis, there is no reason for that. Some setups allow the main camera and any off-axis guider attached to it to rotate so that you can find guide stars. The main field of view can be composed, and then the guider just goes along with it. But some off-axis guiders also allow the rotation of the camera independently, the guide camera independently of the main camera field of view. This may help you locate a guide star, but be sure you don't intrude into the light path of the main sensor. And if it's not at all digitally coordinated, you may need to recalibrate the guider when you use one of these rotating off-axis guider holders. Learn what you have and learn what it does. Okay, RTFM, read that fine manual that came with your system. Figure out what parts you have, what they do, what they don't do. Look at their diagrams and all that other stuff. Get yourself educated. It's cool to have your own caliper to check things out and do other useful nerdy things around the house, but a ruler or a tape measure will do. Know where things actually are on your equipment because you'll be measuring things from these points to other such points. Most cameras run the plugs and lettering parallel to the way their sensor is set. See the lettering, plugs, sensor? The lettering can tell you, therefore, the orientation of your sensor. Checking the manual here, I see the sensor is 17.5 millimeters back from the front plate, just in front of this line on the camera body. If you don't have such convenient markers, put some blue tape on the device and mark where these things are. This is where you may measure from and to. Now, flatteners and reducers may also complicate the issues because they have specific distances that they need to be from the corrective optic to the sensor. These orange and yellow triangles must still match. If installed before the off-axis guider, nothing changes in the guider focus. But if between the off-axis guider and the main sensor, these optical correctors may affect guiding focus. If you already have the optic set up perfectly, ask yourself if you can insert the off-axis guider between it and the main sensor by removing adapters and spacers, or need to install the off-axis guider before it. Can I remove this 16.5 millimeters empty space and replace it with this 16.5 off-axis guider? Of course you can. It's just distance. The back focus remains the same. The use of the corrective optic remains the same. Okay, once you know all the distances and positions, plan it on paper, mock it up and measure it out like these fine people on cloudy nights did. Treat your connectors and adapters nicely. Don't tighten them too much unless you're ready to keep them like that forever. They stick together. Set the prism down alongside, but barely missing the main sensor, prism sensor. Don't set it away too far. Don't set it away too close. If you do happen to set it away too close, or set it too close, you'll get shading on the sensor like this, or if you had this on the side, it would be like that. You need to keep it out of the image circle. You need to keep it in the image circle, but out of the sensor's way. Now, remember how those dimensions have to be accurate to the very last part of the micromillimeter, and you're all worried about that? Well, don't obsess. Come on, down. Yeah, really. Don't be obsessive at this point. Furthermore, there are hidden gremlins, like the differential refraction in the glass and filters, that may mess up all your fine calculations. Set it up as well as you can. But remember, you have a guider focusing mechanism that will cover 5 to 8 millimeters of your mistakes. In theory, you can do this in your living room. We're going to do the rough focusing. Or from your living room to the house across the street if you don't care about your reputation in the neighborhood. The best thing to do is to set up outdoors in the daytime probably, turn off the tracking, set exposure to daytime operation, choose a distant target large enough so that both you and your guider and your main camera have it in the field of view. At this stage, leave some room in your guide camera focuser travel on both sides so that you can adjust guide focus in and out. So focus the main image sensor as well as you can using only the telescope focuser. Measures from some fixed point on your tube, like here, to the back point or to some fixed point on your focusing tube. So here to here, it's 8.5 millimeters in my case. We might need to know this exact distance later. Unfortunately, this measuring tip will not help those with split Cassegrains or other concealed internal focusers. With the main camera focused now, do not touch the telescope focuser. Make sure you're not overexposed, and especially during the day. Now, go to whatever device moves your guide camera sensor in relation to the prism. I'll call these adjusters, and they vary from off-axis guider to off-axis guider. Most common is loosening the set screws, like these set screws here, and gingerly moving the camera up and down in respect to the stalk with the prism on the far end. And then you tighten the set screws. Or you can use a helical focuser, or in extreme cases by removing or adding spaces. The point is that you have to change the distance, this is where the sensor is, from the prism to the sensor in order to focus the guide camera. And note that the adjustment may in fact be between the guider body and the main imaging sensor. It's up to you to know from the manual or just studying the device to show what is proper for your setup. How do you change that distance? Focus the guide camera as well as possible and lock it down. You're in rough focus and done for now. You're not getting the focus you wanted on that guider? Well, make sure the main camera is focused and record its focus position, 8.5 millimeters in my case. Check your exposure connections and all that. Make sure the sensor in your guide camera is rotated correctly. Cover and uncover the front of your scope as it is imaging to see the camera go black and white. Make sure that your guider is in fact operating. Then ignore the main camera focus. Adjust the focus on the telescope, not the off-axis guider, but on the telescope itself with the main telescope focus control. Get a focused guide image in your guider. Ignore your main camera focusing. You're now focusing the guide camera using only the main telescope focuser. And go back and measure where you are, just as you did before. The difference between this and this is how much you need to change, how much you goofed in your initial paper planning and assembly. Either add or remove precisely this much space as and where needed. Remember, some of the distances can be changed with the adjusters, the set screw, the helical focusers. If you need more distance, consider adding or removing spacers. See the red part of this slide as to where to add or remove the space. For instance, if the guider is focusing further out, add space between the prism and the guide sensor, or remove it between the prism and the main sensor. As you are doing this, you must adjust the distance between the pick-off mirror and the guide sensor. Keep the prism in the same position and move over the guider up and down on the stock in relation to the pick-off mirror. When you have altered your imaging or off-axis guider train by these 9.1 millimeters, or whatever your result was, refocus your main camera, and your guide camera should be in focus, or close enough to focus with its own focusing adjusters. Respect that back focus parameter of your corrective flatteners and optics. Remember, your flattener still needs to be so many millimeters away from the actual imaging sensor. Next, it's time for the fine focus. You're simply going to go out at night and repeat the focusing you just did for your rough focus, except that you'll be outside with the tracking scope and a wide field of stars. Make sure you're getting the moon or stars in both the main and the guide camera. Both cameras must see the same type of object out there. Focus the main imager with your telescope focuser. And because you've already rough focused, it should be pretty close on your auto guider focus also. Now focus the auto guider with the adjusters you use, the fingers and set screws, helical focuser, or whatever. Be gentle because you will not need much movement. And of course, lock them down. Refocus your main camera. Now look only at the guide camera result. Loop short exposures on your guider and watch the image and focus metrics as you move the focuser in stages slowly in and out. Do you get the smallest, brightest star in your imager? Don't worry about its shape. Guide stars can be really ugly. Some people claim they don't need to be focused. Off-axis guiders don't need to be focused very well. I'm not in that school of thought. The smaller and brighter they are, the better chance the guide camera can see them. That's what you're after. That's how you tell you've got good focus on the off-axis guider. There are things about off-axis guiders that we did not get a chance to cover, but you know how to space and focus your new off-axis guider, and I expect maybe you will go through this video again before you really put it all together under the stars. But if you forget the details, remember, the point is to make the orange and the yellow rays the same distance. You can do this best by knowing what is in your kit, how your off-axis guider is supposed to work, and what screw does what. And finally, the whole thing comes down to adding and removing distance in your imaging train. I hope these few minutes I have guided you well.
Okay, we're out. Now, do you have any questions for Gowri and me? I'm sorry, Gowri and me. Good. Then I think it's about time to put our show to bed for the night. I want to thank the Astro Imaging Channel team for being here tonight. Tim was in charge of running the production. Thank you, Tim. He had a lot of extra things to do tonight because some of the stuff was coming in on PowerPoints that he made into videos and things like that. So, who's going to be the host next week? Who's in charge next week?
Let me check here.
I'm not going to be the host next week.
I'm going to MC, and Terry's going to be head streamer.
Things are going to change around here. Hope you guys enjoy it. Enjoy the ride, okay? Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Night.